Danny White says that the selection process for the college football playoff should be more selective, i.e. a BCS type of formula. What are your thoughts on that?
Dave, you were on our program Wednesday with us, and we went through the BCS rankings, and Tennessee would be ranked one spot lower than they are right now in the BCS. So,
Exactly.
look, to me, it's going to be flawed. I would say there's two big things that I have a problem with the college football playoffs, the current scenario. Number one, you're saying the best teams, not the most deserving teams. No one knows who the best teams are. 2 years ago when Kirk Herbstreit's on Get Up and First Take and all those shows saying Alabama should be ahead of Tennessee, yes, they have the same record, and then Tennessee beat them head-to-head, but Alabama's better now because they're just better. That's what the eyeball test tells you. I would also say look around the world of sports. How often is the eyeball test right? Very rarely. So why are we using that as the number one thing that we rank these teams for the college football playoff? I would say, number one, change the verbiage to the most deserving teams, not the best teams, because then you get into subjective. You also get into subjective things when I look at who's on that committee. And you have sitting athletics directors. So I watch 10 college football games a week, right? Like every week during the college football season, I watch 10 games so that I make sure I know what I'm talking about when I talk about these other teams. It takes about 40 hours a week to do that before I do my other job. And so I'm easy 80 hours a week during football season. If Ward Manuel's spending 40 hours a week watching, and I would say this, if to really know about the top 15 teams that you're choosing from for the top 12, you have to watch probably more than 10 games per week. If Ward Manuel, the Michigan's athletics director, who's the chair right now of the playoff committee, is watching even 10 games a week, he's taking 40 hours a week all football season long to not be Michigan's athletics director. Do you think that's happening, or do you think Ward Manuel's not watching these dang games?
I don't think he's watching the games.
That's what I'm saying. These guys clearly aren't watching the games. They clearly have, and it's also something you said a few weeks ago on our show that about people you knew with AP votes. I said, how much should they change as they go along? You're like, I don't know. Most people just try to make sure that they create a ranking that would justify their preseason ranking as much as possible. I think they created a ranking, and since then, they're trying to justify that original ranking. They would rather be right than correct. So Georgia loses, they drop 9 spaces because they didn't think a lot of Georgia. Ohio State loses to a worse team, they drop 4 spaces, right? So, and one's at home and the other one's on the road. To me, clearly they have their darlings, right? They think really highly of Boise because of that Oregon win. But if you watch Oregon football, Idaho was a 10-point game. They barely beat Boise on a walk-off. They were only up a touchdown to Oregon State. It was 22-14 at the half. And something happened at the half that made some adjustments, and they've been a different team ever since the second half of that third game of the season. That wasn't the same Oregon team that we saw before that. Boise got the team that Idaho lost to by 10 points. So if you're watching these games, it doesn't make any sense. Alabama, they think Alabama's really, really good. So Alabama's getting the benefit of the doubt despite getting absolutely boat raced by an Oklahoma team everybody else was able to block, that Alabama couldn't block them. So I just think they seem to have their darlings trying to justify what they thought at the beginning of the rankings as opposed to ranking them as they think they're the best. And I think it comes down to those two things. You cannot be a sitting athletics director or really a person with a full-time job and be on that committee. And you cannot, and you shouldn't, I don't think we should say the best teams. I think we should say the most deserving teams. Because, again, I watch 10 football games a week, and I know my eyeball test isn't going to be 100% accurate. So why are we using that?
It's pretty good. I'll give you that, though. I'll listen to you a lot. Go ahead, Caleb.
I appreciate it.
Well, I want to know your thoughts on this. Well, this is my hot take. If I were on the committee, I wouldn't watch the games. I would look at their record, their strength of schedule, their head-to-head, and their quality wins and their quality losses. And that's it. That's as far as I would go. And I think that's kind of what they're doing. And am I wrong for not having a problem with that, even though they're lying when they say that's not what they're doing?
Well, I don't think they're even doing that, though, or SMU would have been ranked more highly than they are, right? Because SMU's one loss was to BYU and they made a quarterback change, and SMU got a lot better.
Yeah, but their SOS rank is still, I think, in the 70s.
Yeah, and I would say that I would like to know what they're using from a strength of schedule because they're not giving us the formula for their strength of schedule rankings as well. Like there was one when I looked at Notre Dame's schedule, and I remember it, and I remember one of the strength of schedule ratings had, I think it was ESPN's, had Notre Dame with like 4 spaces behind Tennessee's strength of schedule. And I'm looking at the group of 5 teams they're playing. I'm like, well, then whoever made the strength of schedule doesn't know what the hell they're talking about, right? So why would I listen to their strength of schedule? It's because I think that can become subjective as well. So I would say if we had a legitimate strength of schedule, I wouldn't have that big of a problem with it. But you also said you would do the thing the committee has not talked about doing, or it's not what Bill Hancock told us at media days. You would consider their losses. Remember, the committee told us they were going to go with their strength of wins, not strength of schedule, not losses. And that was like, so you can win, have three. Yeah, you could have 2 top 10 wins like Ohio State does, and then a loss to Michigan doesn't hurt you. You can have Alabama's schedule where you have 3 ranked team wins. You have 2 losses to 500 teams. So, and they would not be 500 had they not beaten you. So you're at least considering the losses as well, Caleb, which I think gives you a better metric with that. I think that what you're saying comes completely down to how accurate the strength of schedule is. And I don't know that and we don't know what the committee's using from a strength of schedule standpoint.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I like the idea of a formula to take subjectivity out of it, this idea to stop these conspiracies. I'm not so sure there are conspiracies behind the committee, although there is an inconsistency. I'm for Alabama being in. I don't mind Ohio State being ahead of Tennessee. I do have a problem with Notre Dame being ahead of Georgia. I'm like, if you're going to take schedule strength into account at all, there's no way you could have Notre Dame ahead of Georgia.
Yeah.
But I will say that I do think the human element can help, because don't you think there are sometimes just things that you just bait? My example, I always go back to 2000, Miami, Florida State. Florida State got in because of strength of schedule, but Miami beat Florida State and they both had 1 loss. Isn't that where the human element's needed to say, okay, obviously Miami's the better team?
Well, I mean, head-to-head should be the tiebreaker that ends all tiebreakers. I don't need Kirk Herbstreit politicking on the ESPN telling me about the eyeball test, right? Like if someone, you know how I know they're better? They beat them. That's how I know they're better. So I don't need to have another discussion beyond that. And so I do think, like, to your point, the human element can be there, I think, to me, to make decisions on tiebreakers. Like one thing the committee's doing right now, and I'm going to talk a little bit out of both sides of my mouth, they're clearly punishing Miami for those 3 games the ACC officials gave them. They're not treating Miami like a 10-2 football team right now, because the Virginia Tech, they're not. The Virginia Tech game, very questionable. The Cal game, abject crap. They should have lost the Cal game. The officials just stole that game from Cal, point blank, not having the targeting call there. And then the next week against Louisville, or it was 2 weeks later against Louisville, I think Cam Ward's hand was going forward. I don't know that his arm was going forward, though. And so how do you have indisputable evidence to overturn the call if none of us can tell if his arm was going forward? So at least 2 of those 3 games they probably should have lost. And the committee is treating Miami as if they're a 9-3 team, not a 10-2 team. I don't have a problem with that, because otherwise you might see other conferences put the fix in with the replay officials to make sure, or look at it. I don't think the game's like fixed. I think, do we really want to stop our conference's top national title contender because of a call that might have gone the other way? We're going to err on the side of that. But they did it 3 times for Miami. So to me, that's where I agree with you, Caleb. The human element, there needs to be some level of a human element in there. What I don't want is the eyeball test, the beauty pageant, because I know for a fact the people that are on that committee aren't watching football games, and I don't know how many of them know enough about football to be the ones that make that decision, especially if they're not watching the football games, if it's going to be the eyeball test. If you did what Caleb did and they just said wins, losses, big wins, big losses, I kind of don't have a problem with that at the end of the day. And then we'll use head-to-head and some other things as tiebreakers as we go along. I don't think I would have as big of a problem with that. But Ward Manuel said 2 weeks ago, why is this team ranked over this team? Reese asked him, because we think they're better. So you're using the eyeball test, and you have people not watching the games use the eyeball test, which is, to me, really problematic, right?
Okay, I'm going to tell you why they're not going to go to a formula. 30 seconds from Double D Piping.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best.
So when it comes to media in general, Will's one of the smartest guys I know, and I've talked to him about ratings, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you why they're not going to have a BCS type of formula. Because they got a show every Tuesday night, and they sell a bleep ton of advertising for it. So I don't think that ever goes away.
I think that what Sankey and Petiti are trying to do right now, according to both CBS and Yahoo, they kind of both have the same story this morning. I think well, here's what will happen. They'll do a BCS and then have a committee. And I don't think I have that big of a problem with it. Again, if they did what Caleb said he would do, I would have zero problem with them doing this whatsoever, and then have a committee that answers for it, and you use the human element as your tiebreakers. Why not do this kind of like the NCAA tournament, where you have a net ranking, you have a quad 1, a quad 2, a quad 3, quad 4, where you rank all the teams that you have the BCS that does that, and then you have the teams that rank them. I would also say you should just rank the top 25 teams, and then you take who's there. They've tried to get cute. When they put Boise at 12 to begin this, so that whoever was going to be ranked 12th doesn't feel like they got jobbed by the group of 5 team that was in. They kind of painted themselves into a corner, and I know it's year 1. So that's part of it. But you're right. Look, at the end of the day, Tuesday night, ESPN literally owns this thing. ESPN literally owns the SEC. ESPN's going to make sure that there's some level of human element and television show about this. But let's be very honest. One of the things that we've missed in college football, and a little bit of this is on ESPN, and I'm not a 4-letter network hater. Man, we love the professional wrestling aspect of college football, right? We don't want it to get too corporate.
That's the tradition of it.
Yeah.
If you go back over years, it's always arguing about should it be Alabama or Nebraska, should it be blah 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 blah, and split national championships and Georgia Tech and all that in Colorado. I mean, that has always been at the core of college football, and I don't think they ever want that to go away.
Well, I think I will say, because SEC Media Days, it was. They using Caleb, you've probably been there. It was. It used to be that. It used to be a train wreck. It was a carnival. It was a traveling professional wrestling show in Hoover, Alabama, with fans everywhere and people throwing things at Clay Travis when he comes down the escalator, and just it was crazy, right? It was just nuts. And Auburn fans showing up at 4 a.m. local time and dressed in Ohio State gear to troll the Alabama for losing to Ohio State the year before. Like, it was just insane what it used to be. And then ESPN made it corporate. They made it polished. And now it sucks. Like, I'm just going to be honest. I'm probably never going back. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not good. So you don't want to take that away completely from college football. So to me, there has to be a balance of, let's have a little bit of a train wreck, and let's also have a way for this to be played out so the best team gets to win, instead of it just being, the BCS, and then we play the 2 teams, or the bowl systems lay it all out there so everybody can line their pockets and get free cruises and golf trips from different conferences and bowl committees.
Hot take. I like the Bulls. I like the 2-team national title. I've made that case for a while, Will, and what I've argued is I've made the case that you're sacrificing what's great about the 3 months of the regular season for 3 weeks in December. And people bring up how exciting March Madness is. Yeah, and no one cares about the college basketball regular season. You watch Duke and UNC play, I go to sleep because I don't care, because I know they're both going to the NCAA tournament. That's what they've turned college football into.
But I would argue, and I made the argument to Bill Hancock about this years ago, right? Like when we went to the 14 playoff, more games mattered. We went to the 12-team playoff, now more games matter in the regular season. Whereas
I want but 1 versus 2 doesn't matter. That's my problem.
Yeah, that may make sense. But when I'm watching, like, that Ohio State Michigan game mattered, even though Michigan was 6-6, and in years past it probably wouldn't have mattered, right? Like the Alabama Oklahoma game mattered. The Miami Syracuse game, I'm watching on the edge of my seat. I would not have cared about Miami Syracuse if we still had the old bowl system or the BCS or anything like that. So there have been more games. Now, part of it is this. I'm watching 10 games every week anyway, and if those games don't matter towards the national championship, that would suck. So so some of this is for, like, me and gamblers, because we're the only ones watching this much football. It's made so many more games matter throughout the regular season, but college football is tribal, and there are a lot of people that are going to watch their game and maybe 1 or 2 others, and probably not even all of 1 or 2 others, and that's it. And I do wonder if it takes away some of the luster from those types of fans.
Will, have a blessed day, sir. I hope I didn't keep you too long. Certainly appreciate it when you have me on, and I love your insight as always. I'm not only a friend, but a fan as well.
Dave, likewise, man. Dave, Caleb, thank you. Fantastic job, guys.
Thanks, sir. I appreciate it. Will West right there, the sports animal.